Yeah, curiosity and depression doesn't get along, right?
No.
The creative mind went into Genesis mode. That's what makes us human, right? And I love to see that because like when patients come through our door, like we don't see them as diseases or diagnoses. We document it because we have to for the insurances. But for me, I always open with the same question. What is your 10 out of 10 outcome you wish to achieve for yourself by being here? I'm not even talking about medicine at this point, right? What is the outcome? And people they were taken aback by it because it's like, hey, I don't think a doctor's ever asked me that before, right? You have to think about it in a way that's outside your disease and more about what your real desire is, right?
Hi, I'm Liz Larson.
And I'm Bill McKenna.
And together, we created the Cognomovement system. And we'd like to welcome you to the New Life Perspectives radio show,
where we're going to be sharing with you tools, tips, and ideas that are going to change your life.
Hello in UK Health Radio Land. I'm Liz Larson, and I'm here with my friend,
Bill McKenna.
Hey, Bill McKenna. And we are the team that hosts the New Life Perspectives radio show here on the UK Health Radio Network. And we just happen to be the crew that created the Cognomovement system as well. And because of that, we get to meet some of the most interesting people. And we've met somebody that we get to bring to you today that has fascinated both Bill and I. And in preparing for this interview, it was almost difficult to put him in a box to share with you all the things he does. So for that reason, I'm going to ask him to tell you himself about those things. So we want to welcome Dr. Ruan to the show. Welcome.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate you. So I'll give a little bit of my background so people know who I am. So I'm here, standing here in Houston, Texas right now, where I'm the CEO of Texas Center for Lifestyle Medicine, where we try to get to the root cause of chronic illnesses and population health. And I'm also the executive director of the Physician Transformation Institute, where we raise funds to help physicians reduce burnout, depression, and suicidality through education and through developing curiosity through CE credits. So those are the two main things that I do, but I have always been fascinated with very specific data. So if I was looking at chronic disease data, what are the biggest factors there? And it always comes back to the brain, always comes back to the belief systems, always comes back to our emotions, right? And this is kind of in my blood because I'm the sixth generation of physicians in my family, most in Chinese and Eastern medicine philosophies. So it's interesting that we're talking now because like every time I look into different systems and operations of the body and the brain, it all goes back to the same thing, is that we have an enormous amount of potential to improve things, improve our life in every aspect once we concentrate on it, doing the things that you guys are actually a part of in the Cognomovement formula. So I think that what I'm here to talk to the public about is, well, how do we put it all together? So that's a big background about me.
So I just want to ask you a quick question as we dive in. There was something that you said when we were chatting offline before that really has stuck with me. And it's about what you said about doctors and burnout.
Yeah.
And you said there was a number greater than 50% that could be leaving medicine due to burnout. And you said something about suicide rates. Would you just share that with everybody a little bit? Because that blew my mind.
Yeah. So we look at some data. So the most popular article, and people want to Google this, they can, is an article named I Cry But No One Cares. And it's an article that's from Medscape that looked at multiple population of different physicians. And they do these data sets every year. And they looked at who's burnt out, who's depressed, who's suicidal, who feels that they're not purposeful, and who's leaving medicine, right? And so it's and about half are have intention of leaving medicine. This was done originally in 2022. About half wanted to leave medicine by 2025. And I'm like, well, that's really scary, right? And more importantly, if we look at the number of people who either have contemplated suicide or have attempted, we're looking at 9% based on the data sets there. Now, 9%, that's almost 1 out of every 10 doctors that you meet have gone there, right? Well, what about depression? Well, depression actually has a really high percentage as well. We're looking at about 40% of people that consider themselves either clinically depressed or may be getting there, called dysthymic, right? And then we look at the population of people who consider themselves burnt out. Now we're getting close to 80%. So 8 out of 10 doctors are in this burnout phase. So the question is why? And have these numbers worsened since the pandemic? Yeah, they have. But this is where we have to think about the bigger picture, is what is going on in the world and how can we improve it? If we don't have a whole lot of reliability on going to doctors and them having the appropriate strife to get through the day, it's really, really a big concern. But that's why I created my nonprofit.
Well, thank you for creating that non-for-profit, to help them. I think that article was appropriately named, I Cry, but Nobody Cares. Nobody thinks about, I certainly didn't think about the doctors and their struggles. I had no idea that half of them are going to leave within a couple years. This is going to create a worldwide problem. There's no way you could handle the volume with half the doctors. And furthermore, them thinking about ending it, personally themselves. This is absolutely horrible. And you taking this on to be of service to them, to serve the servants, that's very important work. Tell me how you're going about it.
Yeah, so at the Physician Transformation Institute, I created in 2023, earlier in the year. Actually, my sister was the co-founder, and my sister is actually in residency right now, interventional radiology. And it's funny, she just texted me that 2 people were leaving the program, like this morning. And I'm like, oh, how appropriate, we're right before this podcast, right? And so, and that's an interventional radiology program, which is an extraordinarily competitive program to begin with, right? And then there was another article that came out 2 weeks ago that talked about the number of medical students and residents planning not to go into clinical medicine after they leave, but they're either going to med tech or they're doing something more innovative within the tech space, right? And so we're kind of left in complete uncertainty into what's really going on. But the field of medicine has a marketing problem, meaning that the proposed value of a physician, if you think about it from the Western medicine world, right? The proposed value of a physician is someone with prescriptive authority. They're able to prescribe something, right? Now, majority of that prescription is either medications or a surgical procedure or interventional procedure, right? But I think where we really went wrong is doctors really prescribe life, and we have the ability to prescribe life, and we prescribe things that no matter what happens can improve life. But that part has not really been a big focus through medical training. So what I'm doing through the Physician Transformation Institute is, if you go to physiciantransformationinstitute.com, the first thing that you'll see are people who think differently. You'll see, for example, Dr. Daniel Amen, he's on there talking about burnout and how we should really perceive it. You'll see the founder of SoMeDocs, which is social media doctors group, with Dr. Donna Coriel, and where she thinks medicine should be headed. So we have really industry-leading thinkers that are physicians that think really outside the box, because the box that was created was never really designed for us, right? It was designed for a system that is creating this burnout. And here's the thing, and if I can get a physician to be curious, curiosity and depression is incompatible. That doesn't coexist, right? And so all it requires is a little bit of curiosity, kind of explore the back end of the membership page to look to see what other people are saying. That's where things really lie. And also, a lot of doctors also do not have the ability to maneuver very well, especially through tech, right? So we even talk about AI and develop AI tools and all the stuff that we're looking at right now, and how to be valuable within medtech spaces, but still have a practice in medicine. Like, people don't have to leave medicine to be fulfilled. In fact, the ones that actually do may still be just as unfulfilled, you know? And that's what we're getting, right? It's not the occupation that's the issue. It's the value proposition that we really need to have to change what a doctor or a healthcare professional really is for.
You know, it's so interesting. We have a very good friend who's a geriatric, like a general physician, and he worked at a place called the Manor, it's a really high-end retirement community. And his clinic is right in the Manor, and he would, see all these people on a regular basis. And he said it was so frustrating. He said they would come in and tell him what they wanted him to prescribe. They'd seen a medicine on TV and they thought it would solve their problem, and they wanted him to prescribe. And he was really unusual. He was very, very conservative about medication, especially with this group, because, there was a lot of it that come with very hefty side effects.
Right.
And so he would only prescribe if he knew that it was going to benefit them, or thought it was. So that what he really wanted them to do, though, because they're an elderly group, is he wanted them to have better daily habits. He wanted them to get out and walk. He wanted them to utilize the gym. He wanted them to have a better diet, which is really something that you're passionate about too, right? The daily habits of a person.
Right. So the daily habits tell us a lot about life, right? If we think about it, every action that we do, 90% of those actions are subconscious, only 10% is conscious, right? Depending on what book you read, some say 5% is conscious, right? So even like putting our socks on left side versus right side first, and the order that we put on clothing, there's actually a subconscious drive to it. So what happens is most people focus on like the 5% conscious state, right? Most people focus on, oh, this is what I can do to have a better life. No one asks, why do you do that in the first place, right? And if you can answer why you do that in the first place, well, why is that the actual case? So a lot of what we do completely reconstructs how our livelihood is. And if sometimes our identity doesn't necessarily agree with the direction that we move, we call that disease, and our body will manifest disease. Our body can manifest memory issues and autoimmune issues and stuff like that. And that's where we really have to see that our habits, the ones that are in the subconscious state, those are the things that make us who we are. In order for us to be incompatible with disease, we have to dominate that subconscious state.
That's really interesting. One of the basics that we've come to is that the subconscious is really the nervous system. It simply creates a feeling that we think equal to and act upon. Is this something that you would agree with, or what's your perspective on that?
So the nervous system is the subconscious, not the other way around. And let me tell you what I mean by that, right? So when we say the word the nervous system, especially if you're a super analytical guy like myself and most physicians, we're thinking nerves, the thing that connects our brains and our spinal cord. And that's our central nervous system. We have a peripheral nervous system that goes to our body, our organs, our extremities, and stuff like that, right? And so that's not the nervous system that I'm talking about. There's more nerve endings within other systems that's not part of those that is really, really confusing. For example, you have really small nerve fiber called C fibers, like the letter C. And that's implicated in like peripheral neuropathy, for example, right? But most of those nerve endings, especially the ones that you feel that produce pain or numbness, is in an entire organ system that no one else talks about, which is called the fascia. The fascia is what covers the muscle and bony structures. And the fascia actually is a direct representation of a combination of our conscious state and a subconscious state. So let me give you an example. You go into a movie theater, you watch a movie, it happens to be a scary movie. When it comes to a scary scene, boom, you're scared, right? Well, what happens to your face when you're scared? Well, you look pale. Well, why do you look pale? Well, your fascia, right, is responding to your emotions. It's literally squeezing the blood flow away from your face, go into sort of this fight or flight center, right? And that's part of our autonomic nervous system, right? And the fascia is responsible for conducting that. But what if it's not a movie? What if it was a previous traumatic experience? What if you relived that trauma every day, every night? What if you're exposed to that trauma on a daily basis, right? What is your face going to go pale? Probably over a long period of time. Is your fascia going to constrict so much that you develop quote unquote neuropathy symptoms? Perhaps, right? That there's a huge association with PTSD and peripheral neuropathy, right? So this is what we call constrictive neuropathy. And so we're really taking these elements of health that we see from a periphery, and neurologists can test your peripheral nerve, see some impairment there. But instead of saying, hey, I'm going to prescribe you a drug to hopefully make it better, or hey, just walk some more, right? How about working on de-triggering ourselves, right? Working on the trauma, working on the thought process, working on the subconscious behaviors. We're able to regenerate a lot of this. So the question is, if we take them through this process, have they improved? Absolutely yes, they have improved. Patients have improved on this process when we walk them through breath work and Tai Chi, meditative exercises, tapping, you name it, right? So the field of mind-body medicine is heavily scientific, but it's not really presented as so, right? So I do think that, going back to your question, is the subconscious part of your nervous system? It's like, no, the nervous system is part of your subconscious. So is the fascia, right? So there's a lot of different systems, and even our microbiome. The gut bacteria that's in our gut, our oral microbiome, our sinus microbiome, that's part of the entire system, is part of the subconscious system that drives our physiologic behavior. And the nervous system is actually a small part of it.
It is such an exciting conversation. And Dr. Ruan is speaking our language, right, Bill McKenna? All right, let's take our first break here, and we'll hear from the good folks at the UK Health Radio Network. UK Health, take it away. Okay, and we're back. We're talking with Dr. Ruan about all kinds of amazing things, the nervous system, doctor burnout, and daily habits. So here's one that Bill and I share with our practitioners. We'll see what you think about this one. Realistically, it seems to us that the nervous system extends beyond the body.
Yeah.
For quite some distance, maybe up to 6 or 8 feet. It's that function where you know when someone has moved into your space. You know, from behind you, a lot of times people will know someone's there. How do you know? You can't see them. You haven't heard them all of a sudden. Or you feel that somebody looking at you, or you have a sense about what's happening around you before it's happened. So we contend, and we have some reason to do that, the nervous system really extends beyond and is a part of the field around you. How do you feel about that one?
I support it. And here's some evidence, right? So if we look at the nervous system, not in the terms of nerves and all its particular parts, but what do the nerves do? They have synapses. Well, what are these synapses? It's energy, right? And synapses means one nerve communicating more proximal to more distal nerve. And that bridge to jump over, that's called a synapse. Well, that requires energy, electrical conductivity. Whenever you have electricity, you have a magnetic field. So if you think about it, our heart is a really good example. We have our heart right here. On the very top chamber of the heart, we have this thing called the SA node. And the SA node will depolarize and create an electrical field down to the AV node, which is the lub of the heart. And then there's a dub, right? There's S1, S2, lub is the S1, dub is the S2, lub dub, right? The dub is actually part of the nerve fibers within the heart that will actually go back and start the process over again. So we call it a electrical depolarization. So if you actually measure the magnetic field of that, we have about 3 feet of a magnetic field that's really around us, right? And so this magnetic field has huge implications. For example, we know that when the baby's first born, you put the babies on the mother's chest, there's a synchronization of electromagnetic field. Heart rate variability synchronizes, brain frequency synchronizes. Babies in alpha, mommy's in alpha. Babies in beta, mommy's in beta brain frequencies, right? We know that when a couple, they sleep next to each other within the 3 feet, they synchronize breath, they synchronize heart rate, right? And sometimes they synchronize insomnia, right? Because the energetics is really affected or that are around us. So we feel like this is some woo-woo medicine. Well, no, that's actually physics. That's what it is. And you dive into the physics of this, and do our nerves reflect on what's going on in the electromagnetic field? Yeah, it actually does. Well, how do we know? Well, any ER doctor listening to this, if you ever zapped anybody from ventricular tachycardia to sinus rhythm, basically zapping people's chest to bring them back alive, right? Well, what do you think is happening? We're manipulating electrical conduction, right, to affect the neurological system of the heart. So how can we say that there's no other neurological systems that are affected when there's electromagnetic fields and stuff that there is, right? So the disconnect is calling something a electromagnetic field and then correlating it with quote unquote a disease, right? And here's the really simple explanation. We are energy. We have mitochondria that make energy. We have electrical systems. And when you say electrical system ends in some sort of physiologic state, so it doesn't end in one disease, it can end in multiple. Because the way that we classify diseases through something called International Classification of Diseases is looking at the manifestation, what happens when energetics is wrong, right? We're not looking at the causes, we're looking at the manifestations. In fact, there's a lot of diagnoses that are just like that. Fibromyalgia is one of them, right? You're looking at, hey, what's the manifestation of something that's not quite right there? And so, so absolutely. So what you're saying is, it's already proven. It's not like it's being contended in any way. And I think that we as a society have to understand that that's how people have practiced medicine even in ancient times. Like think about ancient healing mechanisms. If you go to Thailand, you have gongs, okay? These gongs vibrate at very specific frequencies, right? If you take that frequency of a gong and you go to another ancient culture, right, going back into the Gregorian chants, right? And those frequencies are actually quite similar. Hey, what's going on, right? If you go back to like ancient China, you have different instruments that's based on different tuning and frequencies. For example, the A minor pentatonic scale, for those music nerds that are out there. If it sounds good, it's the natural chord progression of what humans like, is because those are very synchronized. So the development of music across ancient culture is designed for frequency balancing and healing, and we have to like respect that. Because modern day, well, what do? Well, recently, okay, last month, there's a new technology that's FDA approved, okay, for PTSD. Well, what does it do? It's sound frequency based. There's different gongs and different things, right? Even the modern technology we develop right now is now going back into understanding of how frequency manipulates nervous systems in the actions that we have, right? Looking at treatment for depression, there's FDA modalities of manipulating the electromagnetic field called TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation, right? It's used all over the world right now to affect that. So we're utilizing it, we're manifesting it, right? And we're using technology to really harness that frequency balance.
It's amazing. It's amazing that it's all starting to come together, that people are starting to recognize it again. It's like what we knew in the ancient times is coming back like it's a brand new discovery. It's wonderful the way it's being utilized, but it seems like there needs to be so much more of it. And it makes me think like the doctors that you were talking about, if they were able to, and I know you're working on this, able to utilize more of that in their care, that they might feel better about what they're doing as well, that they might feel like they can serve people more, maybe more organically, or actually help them farther than the medications. Is that what you're finding? Is that the point?
That is the point, but it's not so hard to do because you have this invisible beast called a standard of care, which is a term that's used in legal terms. Is, hey doctor, are you going outside what's called the standard of care, right? And the
Yeah.
standard of care is very pharmaceutical and procedures driven, right? And the in the US, the FDA and other regulatory bodies have very specific designs of what can be prescribed for disease states and ailments, right? What a lot of doctors don't realize is that you can actually go out of that and prescribe what's called off-label things, right? So there's actually half the medications that are prescribed is actually off-label. A lot of doctors don't even realize that. And so, but you can prescribe off-label modalities for a lot of different things. And there's some things in energy medicine and holistic medicine that's actually on label that doctors don't even know about. For example, knee osteoarthritis is approved. The approved modality to treat that actually is acupuncture, for example, right? And there's insurance that won't cover that for that diagnosis. So I think that there's so much focus and education on pharma and on procedures and devices that are FDA approved. Like there's not a formal education on some of the other things that are out there, which is exactly why I created the Physician Transformation Institute, because there's a whole other world that's out there that we actually utilize at the Texas Center for Lifestyle Medicine, right? And we're actually holding conferences, we're holding conferences to teach people the things that we do. And guess what? As long as we track our patients and the outcomes are good, then we can continue to do it. We take medical insurance and Medicare and stuff in our facility. And so we have to track outcomes. And we have value-based contracts, which means that the patients don't get better. We don't get paid, right? And guess what's the number one way they get better? They come to our mind-body medicine sessions, Tai Chi, Qigong, and all the stuff like that. And they have amazing outcomes no matter what the disease states are, right? So as long as we're able to create the system and nurturing system, it allows people to flourish.
Well, you know what? If you're listening out there around the world, especially here in the United States, I got to repeat this because this is so significant. They only get paid if people get better. And this is huge. Talk about putting your money where your mouth is. That is unheard of. Like when I first talked to you about this off camera a few weeks ago, I was like, both myself and Liz, we were shocked. We were like, what did you just say? That's amazing. And that this actually exists now.
Yeah, this is called value-based reimbursement model. It's what's considered an alternate payment plan to the traditional fee-for-service model. So fee-for-service is exactly what it sounds like, right? You do something and you get paid for it, maybe sometimes. And then the value-based payment model is that, hey, you actually have a membership doctor, and those people who are members, if they do well, then yes, you get reimbursed. If they do really well, you get reimbursed more, right? And if they don't, then you risk them not being part of your patient panel. So we're actually rewarded for clinical outcomes. So as of right now, about 20% of the government contracts are value-based model. That's moving to 80% in the next 2 years. So we're seeing a complete shift in insurance, the way that insurance is over the next few years. For those people who are traditional doctors in the fee-for-service model that are like it, because it's actually a very different model of practice. But for guys like me, I love it. And I love looking at outcomes. I'm a data nerd, and it's great because I can see that, hey, this is not working. Why continue? And that's what I really like to do.
I think it's a wonderful thing that's happening. It's a wonderful move in medicine because you do see people getting into medical care. Maybe they've never had medical care most of their life, and now they need it. And it seems like their health gets worse and worse and worse because you've got one thing prescribed over the other, and
Right.
a lot of those interactions, and this doctor's not talking to that doctor, and it becomes kind of a mess. So for the focus to be that you do get better, that's super amazing. So we were talking about all of the things that it actually takes to get better. Clearing trauma. That's a big one, right? Having the nervous system not re-experiencing daily food, exercise. Let's talk about the daily habits that you were saying you wanted to talk about at the beginning. What can people do What are the pieces, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Mhm. Yeah, so I'll make it really, really simple for people to understand this. And this is how I approach physicians with burnout too. It's identical, right? So a lot of people like to, especially in my field in functional integrative health, like to focus on the diet. The diet's never the problem to begin with. People assume diet equals what you eat. No, that's not how it works. A diet is a subconscious behavior that develops over time. So we take away the word diet, for example, of what we actually eat. Let's call it an eating behavior, right? So once again, removing the word like diet and call it eating behavior. So you have to ask yourself what I like to call the 5 whys, right? So the 5 whys means that, okay, let's say if let's say I'm not where I want to be. I want to lose 20 pounds. So the first I asked, well, why do I want to lose 20 pounds? It's like, well, so I can fit into this suit that's been sitting in my closet for 20 years, right? And then you ask the second one, well, why do you want to fit into this suit? Like, what's the purpose behind it? Well, I want to fit into the suit because 20 years ago, I felt healthy. I felt young and vibrant compared to now. And then you ask the third why, like, why is it such a big difference between 20 years and now? You're like, well, life happened, had children, had different life situations that occurred that created a lot of stress. I was like, okay, well, you ask another why. So why did it create stress for you? And then I was like, okay, well, perhaps it created stress for me because like I continue to be reactive to life and let life happen rather than kind of take control of it. And you can keep on going if you want. I say the 5 whys, but it's at least 5 whys. You can keep on going and say maybe a 6 whys. Like, why did you let it take control? And you're like, well, maybe that's how I was taught when I was younger, right? And so what happens is that you just related losing 20 pounds to the root of this, maybe what I was taught when I was younger, right? So instead of saying changing my diet, how can I re-experience what I learned when I was younger by challenging it? Is what I learned still serving me, yes or no? If it's not, am I able to get rid of it? If I'm able to get rid of it, do I have guilt that's attached to it, right? Because maybe people who I love are the one who taught me those patterns to begin with, right? And so this is how you actually work through behavioral habits. So there's one of my favorite books is actually behind me, right here. One of my favorite book is called Atomic Habits that are right here by James Clear. And it actually talks about how your habits have 3 different circles, okay? So most people focus on the outside circle, which is the outcomes, like 20 pounds, that's an outcome, right? And right in the middle of that, you have the process. Well, how did you get to that 20 pounds overweight? Well, the process is I got stressed and I overate, right? And then the middle one is the identity. So by you asking the whys, okay, why did I do this over and over again and sequentially? What happens is you actually develop your own personal identity. So my identity is one where my, parents or grandparents or whatever is teaching me to eat in a way or behave in a way that no longer serves me. So if I start from the inside out, which is the identity first, to the outside rather than the outside in, the outcomes into the middle, then your success rate of breaking a habit is exceptionally high. Whereas if you start from the outside in, your success rate from breaking a habit is less than 2%, right? And this is how I look at everything. Has 5 whys behind it, and if you challenge yourself in everything that you do, the 5 whys, you'll start realizing that all your 5th why start sounding the same, right? You're getting to the root cause, and it may be a traumatic event, or it may not have to be one traumatic event. It could be little t, like multiple little traumatic events here and there, right? Or maybe it's events you don't perceive to be trauma. Maybe you had a very strict and structured childhood. You're like, well, on the outside, my childhood is great, but I was not allowed to live outside the rules, the confine of the rules. And I was taught if I did, that was a bad thing. So I risked losing love, right? And so it's not about diet. It's not about exercise or movement. It's not about those things. Those are what's called outcome-based. We have to get into the identity-based and how we move ourselves out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, speaking our language. All right. we've bumped up against our second break. So let's hear from the good folks at the UK Health Radio Show, or Radio Network, actually. UK Health, take it away. And we're back. We're having an amazing conversation with Dr. Ruan. And we're talking about the whys. You said 5 whys. Like, if you can get down to the identity of a person and really, does that have to do with their nervous system? What is their identity and their nervous system pairing to create the life they see around them?
Mm-hmm. So let's take that example for a second. Right before the break, we talked about asking the 5 whys of every situation that you're in, right? So let's say that I'm able to tie the fact that, okay, I'm 20 pounds overweight, I want to lose that 20 pound. And I tie that to the identity of, hey, these are behavioral habits that's happened since I was a little kid, right? Let's take that for example, okay? So normally, if I just focus on losing 20 pounds, I'm going to be doing things that I don't like to do. Let's say that I'm going to be forced to go to the gym. I'm going to be eating a diet that I don't really want to be eating. I'm going to be, exchanging my time in the gym for other things I really love to do. So most people's habits die because they're so outcome focused, right? So what happens physiologically is that even if they start thinking about going to the gym, they tied that action, oh, I have to do this to lose those 20 pounds, right? That's a very negative trigger. What's going to happen neurologically? All of a sudden, you're going to be too tired to go to the gym. All of a sudden, you have a headache. All of a sudden, you're like, oh, I feel so dehydrated. All of a sudden, you get up and you feel kind of dizzy. So your parasympathetic nervous system comes in and say, you're gone. We're staying put. That actually comes from that subconscious trigger tying the action of going to the gym to wanting to lose 20 pounds, right? But what if I did the opposite? What if I said, hey, you know what? The things that I was taught when I was younger may not be necessarily serving me. So instead of going to the gym, what if I first have a discussion with my family members, right? I was like, hey, you know what? This is the pattern that I've had when I was younger. Do you think it's really serving me? And are there things that we can do to eliminate this? And can we do it together as a family? Or maybe you don't have a family. You think to yourself, or are there things that I can do to terminate some of these patterns? So let's say this happened with a patient of mine. I went through with her, and she's like, you know what? She was born in a very rural area in Louisiana. And so they have very little access to fresh produce and stuff like that. But what happens is that she tied the idea of fried foods, okay, to the love that her grandma, her parents died. So her grandma raised her, that her grandma really raised her through to the thick and thin through the countryside in Louisiana, right? So what she got was that part of her habits is almost like she's projecting grandma. So because grandma already passed away, she can't have a conversation with her. So I asked her to do these things. I want you to imagine that you're talking to your grandma. I said, hey, grandma, like, this is where I am right now. It's affecting my health. I've got heart disease and diabetes, and I'm about to get a toe amputated, right? Like, do you think those patterns are serving me? And I'm like, what do you think your grandma's going to say? And she's going to say, hell no, it's not serving you anymore, right? Let's do something different. Then have that conversation. Tears filled her eyes. And guess what? It wasn't so hard after that, right? Because her identity of wanting to honor her grandma was still there because her actions no longer contradict her identity. Whereas before, there was a huge identity difference. I call it the identity delta, right? And so you have expectations, and if you have high expectations about something, and then you have your real reality, or let's call your perceived reality. So expectations minus reality equals disappointment. So if you're expecting to lose 20 pounds and just going to the gym 5 times a week and eating healthy, you don't necessarily get there. Your expectations is high, but your perceived reality is like, I only lost 2 pounds, or maybe I gained 5 pounds, right? And your disappointment will be high. It's arithmetic, right? But if you start with an identity focus, is that, hey, my expectation is that I want to terminate, okay, my childhood behaviors, right? And my perceived reality is that I'm a manifestation of my childhood behaviors. And then that becomes a lot more even. So what you expect with the true root of what you expect and your reality matches up, your disappointment's going to go to 0, right? And then you work in the bonus round. So it's life's balance sheet. Makes
It's
sense?
amazing. We had this a client who came to one of our events. She was Pacific Islander descent
Ah,
and very close to her family. And you know, she'd been ill, and she, at the event, she was struggling with, I think it was a spot on her lung. And there was this period of time where after the event, she was going to be going to see if that was cancer or not. And she said at the very end of the event, she said, this one thing that's stopping me, she said, everybody in our family is ill. We have these health issues. That's what we do.
mhm.
And if I become well, I'm out of the clan. Like I'm not doing the thing that we do, you know, La Cosa Nostra, our things, our family's things deeply ingrained.
Yeah.
And so she cleared that during the event. But one question I asked was, would you be willing to be the first in a long line of really well people? Would you be the matriarch of that lineage? It had never occurred to her that that was even a possibility.
It's
But
powerful.
saying
Yeah.
it out loud, she said, saying it out loud, it sounded stupid. It made no sense to her in her own mind that she would stay sick to be a part of her clan.
Mm.
But exactly like you're saying, these things are so powerful. We don't want to step out of what we do, our things.
Yeah. Because our things are tangible, right? They're like finite things that are there. And we humans love things that are truly tangible because it presents as real for us, right? But the reality is that, you know, one tangible thing means something different than to two different people. So let's say that if I have peanut butter, okay? My dad loves peanut butter. That's his snack. That's his favorite thing, right? And he'll hold it in his hand. He'll feel a lot of joy in it. But the same peanut butter, hold it to one of my friend's kids who's severely allergic to peanuts. That's a whole other different construct, right? And the energy is different. So the true reality is not the peanut butter. It's how you perceive the peanut butter to be. And that's the actual true reality that we should value over the actual peanut butter itself.
Yeah, absolutely true. Well, I don't think most people get the opportunity to look at those things. I think your 5 why question is so valuable. And another way to say that, sometimes we'll say what's important to you about this, you know, and what else is important to you. But the 5 whys, I mean, getting to the bottom of why you're doing the things you're doing and wanting the things you're wanting is so clarifying. It's so illuminating for a person, right?
Mm-hmm. And not, well, it's a simple concept, but when you execute it, there's a lot of aha moments, there's breakthroughs, right? And so one of the things that we do at Texas Center for Lifestyle Medicine is that we have our Medicare focused like group where we have discussions about stuff like this. And so I always like to do at least one breakthrough moment per group. Like if someone's not in tears, I'm doing something wrong, I feel like. And so and tears. And one of the things that we looked at is the 5 whys is I had a patient who she has, I basically do tell her to list things that she's been avoiding. And one of the things she's avoiding is cleaning the closet. And then she got to her 5 whys. So I was like, well, why are you avoiding cleaning the closet? Because like, I'm too tired. Like, why are you too tired? I was like, oh, because I have this disease, this disease, this disease. And then she's like, wait, that's not true. Because even though I have these diseases, I did something else instead. I went to the grocery store. I could have been using the same energy to clean the closet. So she's like, wait, what's going on? Let me backpedal a little bit. And then ultimately she got to the fact that on her 3rd why, she realized that she was avoiding looking at this dress that she knows that she can't fit into.
Oh.
We went deeper, right? We went deeper. Is that, okay, well, it had nothing to do with the cleanliness of the closet. It had to do with the representation of a tangible object, okay, the dress or the peanut butter, right, and how she was able to perceive it, right, and then she walked through. Well, when was the last time she wore the dress, and is it possible to feel that sense of joy again? And that's what those are the things to really work on. It had nothing to do with cleaning the closet in the first place.
Isn't that amazing? You know, you backtracked it back, why? And there it is, a feeling a feeling about that dress and her life.
Yep.
Amazing. Amazing.
We had a client once that was fascinating. The work that we do, a lot of times it doesn't appear that there's a direct correlation. We noodle around in the nervous system and whammo, all of a sudden, something is connected that you'd have to probably go 59 levels deep to find. And she had had an assault that had happened during a surgery when she was 16. And that was the main focus of the session. And strangely, she went home and cleaned a closet. And in this closet, it had 20 years worth of files. She'd been looking at this mess of files for 20 years, could do nothing about it. When she got home, she immediately looked at that and knew exactly what to do, cleaned it up. It didn't take very long at all, knew what to do with the files, threw things away, and voila, it was done. So we asked, what did that have to do with this assault? She said, I have no idea, but I just had the energy and the brain power to do it. Her nervous system was not so focused on that assault. It wasn't putting so much energy into it anymore, that she was free to have this spontaneous creative idea about how to clean the closet.
Yeah, curiosity and depression doesn't get along, right?
No.
The creative mind went into Genesis mode. That's what makes us human, right? And I love to see that, because like when patients come through our door, like we don't see them as diseases or diagnoses. We document it because we have to for the insurances. But for me, I always open with the same question. What is your 10 out of 10 outcome you wish to achieve for yourself by being here? I'm not going to talk about medicine at this point, right? What is the outcome? And people they were taken aback by it, because it's like, hey, I don't think a doctor's ever asked me that before, right? You have to think about it in a way that's outside your disease and more about what your real desire is, right? And I'll tell you, some patients will come in, they have binders full of stuff, they're really complex, and they can't answer that one question because they haven't thought about it. Because the energy behind that question is one of Genesis, one of how do you want to create your future, right? Rather than, hey, what disease are we going to treat today? Which is not necessarily, that's a more of an outcome-based thing, right? So by the way, this is how medicine was taught hundreds of years ago, right? If you look at the documents that were in the early philosophers in medicine, especially like Hippocrates and stuff like that, that's exactly what is taught, to look at, one, do no harm, and two, get to the root, right? And 3 is let food be thy medicine, right? So you have this entire construct there of how medicine really should be practiced. And if we honestly gotten really away from that, probably since, I would say, the early 1900s, when things became a lot more standardized. Before thousands of years before that, medicine is practiced like this, right? And we really have to see healthcare professionals as leaders, not as prescribers, not as providers, but as leaders. So,
has anybody, if you're out there listening right now, has anybody actually had a doctor ask you this? Seriously, you gotta get over and see him. I mean, just the fact that you're asking the question means that you got some skills on how to get you there. I love this conversation.
So speaking of which, we are running up against the clock here for the end of our the time we have on the UK Health Radio Network. Dr. Ruan, would you be willing to hang out for an extended conversation?
Yeah, sure.
Great. All right, you guys. So would you tell everybody how to find you?
Yeah, so there's a couple ways. So if you are a healthcare professional in the world that's out there, and maybe you think that you're made for something more, check out physiciantransformationinstitute.com. Be a member. Check out what other people are saying in the back end. We have a retreat coming up as well. We have an annual retreat in Costa Rica. We just had our first one, so we're planning our second one, where we actually explore this. If you are a patient, or I shouldn't say a patient, or someone who's suffering, and you want to check us out at Texas Center for Lifestyle Medicine, that's where me and my team are. What we do is we have a program-based approach to tackle the biggest things in medicine. And if you're curious about learning more about my philosophies and want to be part of a brain health network, go to Betterbrain.info. There's a forum, and I'll be sharing some really interesting secrets and giving you an artificial intelligence tool to question your own brain health called the Brain Health Navigator. And AI is sort of the future of where things are going, and I'm deep within it. I really enjoy it as well.
So just a hint for our extended conversation, we are going to pick Dr. Ruan's brain about that, the
Yes.
Brain Navigator.
Yes.
All right. So if you want to hear this extended conversation, you can find it anywhere that you like to listen to podcasts. Hashtag Wellbeing Podcast. You'll find the UK Health Radio Network on Apple, iTunes, all over wherever you want to find a podcast. And you can hear the extended conversation. Another place you can find it is on YouTube at the Cognomovement channel. So if we're leaving you here, be safe and be well until next time. Otherwise, we will see you on the extended conversation. So for now, thanks so much, Bill McKenna.
Thank you, Liz. And thank you,
so much,
Doctor.
Dr. Ruan.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Okay, and we are back with the extended conversation. We're talking to Dr. Chen Ruan about everything, medicine, nervous systems, all the things, and a brain navigator. So Brain Navigator GPT, tell us about this. This sounds incredible.
Yeah, I think I've been trying to develop tech systems for quite some time. And in fact, I probably spend more time doing that than clinicals and seeing patients. And one of the things that's been on the forefront is the launch of ChatGPT, which is an amazing AI platform. And on the same platform, not too long ago, they released the ability to sort of create your own intelligence. So one of the great things about it is that people get to provide what's called a knowledge base. And a knowledge base is basically feeding it things such as articles and content and stuff like that. And I happen to feed this the knowledge base of 54 physicians.
My gosh, 54 physicians?
Well, what happened is I hosted the Reverse Brain Disorders Summit a year ago on the Dr. Talks show, and those transcriptions and the material and the data from the people who spoke there, plus other people who didn't speak there, actually went into the creation of the Brain Health Navigator. So
Nice.
You have the brains of, for example, Dr. Daniel Amens, one of my favorite human in the world, one of my great people that I've had the fortunate ability to meet. Dale Bredesen, who wrote the book The End of Alzheimer. You have Dr. Amelia Scott, who has a holistic look at migraines, and the list goes on, right? And what happens is because we have this data now, we can actually program it to behave in a certain way. So that plus my brain of how I look at root cause disease as an issue actually came with this. Now we came up with this thing called the Brain Health Navigator, and it's a GPT. GPT just means it's a generative AI program where you can access and ask questions on anything. This one is strictly designed for brain health and life coaching. But it's really updated on a lot of information. And so what's interesting is that this gets updated daily. So we have knowledge bases daily kind of being dumped into it. And but that's the first of many that we're working on for generative AI.
Oh my gosh. Talk about a service to the world, taking all that and making that available. I can't imagine, having used both of us use ChatGPT, for different purposes, having that information available from all of those world greats. Imagine tapping into Dr. Daniel Amen's brain. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Get a dump out of that.
In reality, ChatGPT already has the ability to do that, but it's not delivered in a very purposeful way, right? And so, for example, if you're asking it something for brain health, it'll list out things that you should do. but it may not list out why you should do them, nor will it list out where you should start, right? So a lot of the ways I designed this is more for an algorithmic process of working through root issues and what's going on with the brain. So this took hundreds of hours, by the way. So in order to make it what it is, we had to really learn about prompting the artificial intelligence to come up with a very specific thing. But that's where the Brain Health Navigator really came in. It'll be on Betterbrain.info for public access. Right now, the date that we're talking, which is the end of November in 2023, the way it is right now, it's still in beta form from ChatGPT. So shortly, it could be next week, it could be next month, we don't know. There's going to be an alpha form for it, but it'll be available to people in the OpenAI store. As of right now, that store doesn't exist yet, but they've announced that they will. So this is useful in 3 ways. The first way is that no matter where you are, when you're using it, you have the ability of a knowledge base that's there that you can inquire. The second thing is that it's going to take you into very simplified fashion of looking at your brain and cognitive health and even your mental health as well. And the third benefit of this is that this is kind of immortalized, right? I mean, you can have the same technology affect multiple generations down as long as you have access to the AI that's right there. So I really created this for 6 generations down, not really just for now and for myself, right? And I think that this is something that I continue to sort of build my version of legacy on, is actually through generative AI.
Wow. Wow, that's forward thinking.
Amazing. There's something I wanted to ask you about too, around brain health. It's so interesting because we use the term brain health or hear the word brain health, but I think very few people have any idea what that even means, except for in the disease frame. Like, we know that if a person has Parkinson's or Alzheimer or some other kind of dementia or even MS, some of those things, we know that that has to do with the brain. But what the heck do you do about it? And I know in a previous conversation, general neurology, there's not much really that can be done. And from a personal standpoint, I've shared with everyone many times that my parents died of brain diseases. And what was interesting is they did not have the typical markers for brain disease. Never in 1,000 years would it have been expected that these 2 particular people, and at the same time, one got Parkinson's and one got Alzheimer's. So would you share with everybody your unique take on brain health and some of the things that can actually be done?
Yeah, so and I want to kind of define brain health, because it's not about the organ. It's about what the idea of the organ is. If you think about a brain, what does it do? It makes us move, it makes us dance, it makes us sing, gives us emotions, right? What to make decisions. The ability of the brain to do that requires a connection between the brain and other parts of our body and other parts of the brain as well. And then the other thing behind brain health is that most people like to separate out mental health and brain health. They're the same thing, it's the same organ that's creating these emotions, right? You have different parts of the brain that's responsible for example, inhibitions like the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala with different emotions, the hippocampus with long-term memory, parts of the temporal lobe associated with attention, et cetera, right? And so like these are what we see as brain health, is the actual connections between ecosystems, right? And so I think a lot of people have kind of separated out the brain because one, it's really easy thing to look at in the stance of Alzheimer's dementia, for example, right? So we know that the brain produces these things called amyloid plaques and tau protein and tangles. And we see, okay, well, this equals Parkinson's disease in our population. Well, great. Well, does it equal not Parkinson's, Alzheimer's disease in our population? Well, does it equal Parkinson's disease or Alzheimer's disease in the entire world? No, there's people that develop these same plaques and tangles and stuff that have tons of them in the West Indies that have 0 symptoms, right? And so you're like, well, is that really the issue, or is there something else that's really going on? And so the part of brain health is immune health. Like the immune system really controls so many elements of the brain. So the amyloid protein and the tau tangles that develop during Alzheimer's or on the progression towards Alzheimer's, well, that's part of the brain's immune system. And so many medications have been has been launched to try to either minimize that or dissolve it. And guess what? When you dissolve those plaques, the patient bleeds, the brain bleeds, because all the things and the toxins and the organisms that's sequestered in that protein now is wreaking havoc on the rest of the brain. So it's actually sequestering something that's there, right? And we're like, okay, well, where does that come from? Well, believe it or not, majority of it comes from your mouth, right? If you have gingivitis, that goes directly into the brain. If you have other organisms, you have spirochetes and all these different organisms that go there. And beyond that, you have pollution that really goes there. You have inhalants that really go there, right? There's a beautiful article written by a bunch of scientists that's led by Dr. Dale Bredesen called Inhalation Alzheimer's. Like, read that article, Inhalation Alzheimer's. Talking about a quarter of Alzheimer's in the world has a factor of something that they've inhaled over a long period of time, right? And the brain is sequestering areas to do that. So we can't see brain health just as the brain. We have to see it as our environment, our emotions, our conscious, our subconscious, our actions. And it's a really brain-centric way of looking at our entire health. Does that make sense?
That is, I love the way you put it, because you're really incorporating everything. And so many people have segregated it down to just only diet, but taking into consideration things like your dental health and flossing, and your ability to digest, and all of these things being incorporated in on it. And the relationship in between trauma, whether physical trauma or emotional trauma, in your mental health, which is also your brain. So it's all intermingled, and the things that you're doing there down at your clinic, they're life-changing for so many people. And I just love the way that you're approaching it from a person's dream, approaching it from the end. What do you want to do once you get there and we get you good and healthy?
Yeah.
I've seen an ad for sorry, go ahead.
It's an engineering problem, right? I think that if you think about the way that brain health is kind of perceived, and as Bill's talking about, like, people are taking it in different sectors, Parkinson's versus Alzheimer's versus ADHD. Like, for me, energetically, they're very similar things, right? And then also, if you look at pediatric population with autism, with all these different things, the fundamentals are still the same. Are you exposed to something you're creating immune reaction for? And if you are, that's what's manifesting on these different disease states, right? And so we call them disease states because they're not just diseases; they're a state in which it could be manipulated. Things can be better, things could be worse. If you catch things early enough, like Parkinsonism or Alzheimer's, a lot of that mechanisms can be improved. But most people don't understand that the initial manifestation of end-stage brain diseases started 3 decades before. So you have to catch people as early as we can. Well, what are the symptoms that started 3 decades before? Well, depression is probably the first one, okay? And then it leads to other different things, right? And so it's like this momentum steamroll that occurs, and then we've seen sort of this end stage disease that are right here, right? And some things happen faster than others. Multiple sclerosis happens a whole lot faster than Alzheimer's, for example, right? But it's still part of the immune system. And yes, there's genetic predisposition to as well that is a part of this whole thing. But we have to start with, hey, what outcome do we want to achieve? Like, what type of functionality do we really want to achieve here, and why, right? Be purposeful about it. And that's how we design our lives.
So what I started to say was that I've seen an ad, and I don't remember exactly whether it was for a medication or a study, but something about there's going to be the first person who recovers from Alzheimer's. Have you guys had in your clinics, have you actually seen someone not just reverse some symptoms, but get out of the pattern?
Actually, it's pretty common, but I want to make a big caveat. So whenever I say Alzheimer's disease, most people are thinking about people who are very severely debilitated, right? But there's people that are diagnosed with early cognitive decline and mild Alzheimer's, right? And the idea is this, like, no matter if it doesn't matter what we call it, we know that there's deficiencies there. But are there people who were originally diagnosed as categorized as having Alzheimer's disease that's no longer in the category? Yes, that's really common. And it's because there's other things to really focus on. Like, I don't feel like the diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease is all that fair, because once people get diagnosed, people stop. There's so many different aspects. Let me give you some examples, right? And so someone has Alzheimer's disease on the diagnosis, and you can see that the brain is starting to shrink and develop these proteins and stuff. Well, let's go back to fundamentals. So what does the body need to survive? What does the brain need to survive? Air. Well, what is the most common issue with people in air? Sleep apnea. Okay, how many people have sleep apnea and Alzheimer's disease? A huge population. And so, well, why not improve the sleep apnea or treat it or cure it? There could be different interventions and surgical interventions. And then can we see if the brain actually improves on that? Yeah, we see that really commonly. I mean, I do quantitative EEGs and brain mapping models in my clinics. We can actually see people improve on a brain map, right? Or even beyond that, okay. Let's look at another category of error. What if you're iron deficient? Well, how is that in the error category? Well, iron is responsible for the binding of oxygen and hemoglobin to deliver the oxygen in different places. We're in the same category here, right? So you have the actual air, and then you have the thing that carries the air to the body. How many people with Alzheimer's disease are iron deficient, or they're not, or maybe they're low normal, but can they improve their symptoms once they get treated there? Yeah, probably, right? And what about infection? Right? So if someone has, so here's the thing, and this is what's a little messed up about the diagnostic fields in medicine. If someone's considered to have, quote unquote, Alzheimer's disease, and let's say they have an infection, for example, urinary tract infection, which is really common, chronic sinus infections, really common, dental infections, really common, and they're treated for it and they get better, they get undiagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and they call it metabolic encephalopathy or toxic metabolic encephalopathy, right? And so the nomenclature changes. So people are thinking, oh, Alzheimer's disease is hopeless. Well, no, they just technically got undiagnosed because they see that something's reversible. Oh, it can't be Alzheimer's disease, right? So let's call it something a little different. And so this is what, I mean, back when I was doing hospital medicine, like, we manipulated the charts to reflect that, because technically Alzheimer's disease, you're not supposed to improve from it when you treat these infections, right? And so we were made to change the diagnosis very specifically towards sort of a different direction, right? And I'll tell you why. That's actually has to do with insurance reimbursement in hospital. That's a whole other conversation, but but that's we're not going to talk too much about that today. But the question is, do people get better after going through some very specific things that we look for? The answer is yes. Whether or not they, quote unquote, reverse Alzheimer's disease, or we just have them undiagnose it to call it something else, that happens all the time. It's super common. Make sense?
That is super, super interesting, that clarification. Yeah, I'd never heard that before. And it makes all the sense in the world. But I have an example of exactly this.
Okay.
I personally helped save 3 lives, well, extend them a while longer. My friend's grandma was one of the sharpest people I ever knew. She was in her late 80s when this happened. And she could tell you what she had for breakfast on Wednesday in 1972. You know, literally, she knew everything. She was in a historical society and just sharp and bright and healthy. And then one day, she wasn't, like, literally 2 weeks, and she was forgetful and she couldn't think, but she'd also put on 20 pounds of water weight. Now, she would tell you she weighed exactly 110 pounds her whole life, exactly. And all of a sudden 20 pounds. So family was out of town, so they asked me to take her to the doctor. So I did. Now, this woman was actually leaking water out her feet. She'd started putting maxi pads in her shoes because she was leaking water out her feet. So we went to the doctor, and the doctor was, I don't know, a little crazy. She said she needs wound care. So they were having nurses treat wounds on her feet that didn't exist, right? So we have this same doctor friend who is the geriatric physician. And so I called him and said, I don't know, this is not right. Something's not right with this woman. And I know what her doctor's saying is not right. So he referred us somewhere else. Well, it turns out that her sodium potassium was out of balance because of a set of drugs she was on, a high blood pressure, a blood thinner, and a cholesterol medicine.
Okay.
And that combination evidently can cause your sodium potassium to be out of whack. So the doctor had said she just needs to go in a nursing home. She's dying. She has Alzheimer's. And I said, no, she doesn't have Alzheimer's. She was, could tell you what she had for breakfast on, Wednesday in 1972, 2 weeks ago. Like, this is not it. Right. So she goes in, they change the medication. They give her some Lasix. She gets the water off and she's perfectly fine and lives, I think, another 10 years healthy as she could be.
Wow. Yeah.
So not long after that, within the year, I get a call from my friend sobbing, her mother in Venezuela, same thing, super sharp woman, very, very sharp mind. All of a sudden goes from a sharp mind 2 weeks later to Alzheimer's, going in a nursing home, dying. I'm like, wait a minute, hold everything. Check if she's on these 3 medications. She said, well, I know that she is. Awesome. Ask them to test her sodium potassium. Like, I'm not a doctor. Don't play one on TV. How would I know this? And why didn't they test it? They do. Sure enough, that's the issue. Adjust her medication. She lives another 10 years. And then there was a third one that was my uncle. Same exact situation. But had I not had that first experience, I wouldn't have known. And I'm thinking, why are people just thinking they're old and they have Alzheimer's? Simple solution.
Let me tell you something that's really incredible, and this is something we see all the time. So one of the medications talking about is hydrochlorothiazide, which I like to call the bane of my existence because that's the one that drops sodium really, really fast out of nowhere. Even though people have been on it for years, decades, even one day it'll just drop, right? And so that's a really, really common thing. And in fact, sometimes you check the sodium and look, quote unquote, in the normal range. But some people live at a higher range of normal, and that drop actually makes them have mental status issues that are there. So we see that quite a bit. But here's the good news. I told you I developed AI, right? So we now have an engine. And if you're the US, you want to rejoice on this. This is actually part of a Medicare program now. And this is an artificial intelligence engine that's able to look at a patient's labs and medical history and medications and have an algorithmic way of figuring out what is causing cognitive issues. Now, I don't own the company. I have no financial relationship with the company, but it's a great company. It's called U Method, the letter U and then Method. The U Method program that it's called the Restore You program. You can only get it through certain healthcare professionals. We're one of the first in the countries to execute this at a large scale. And so we're actually utilizing AI to look at these factors. So whenever any doctor pulls out a report, they'll tell you that, hey, this person's hydrochlorothiazide. You may want to check a sodium to see what's going on. Or if the patient already has sodium, it's like, the sodium's dropping over the last few months. This may be causing the issues, and it moves up to the very top, right? In reality, it's not that doctors are dumb. We're not dumb. It's that there's so many things that we have to deal with, bureaucratic issues and hospital management and all the stuff like that. Is that we should be relying on technology to look at these things, right? And so, and in fact, the podcast right after I end here is with them talking about this. But we're at the age where technology is able to do this now to prevent like further issues from happening. So I am very hopeful to. And now some people get a little iffy about AI. I actually love it because it actually improved the way I practice medicine along with my healthcare professionals within my organization. And so there's certainly ways to engineer, out of it that we can see and also collect large amounts of data, analyze it in a split second, and see what's really invisible for the doctor's eyes to see. I think that's where we're really headed.
I love it that you're utilizing this and really helping people. That is an appropriate use of AI, and you're doing it. A blend of the old and the new, and we so appreciate you coming on with us throughout this extended version as well. Everybody, his time is very valuable, and we're so appreciative of the knowledge that he's brought forward. Please give him a visit. His website will be down in the links. Just so I don't mess.
Yeah,
Betterbrain.info. Betterbrain.info.
And once again, if you're a doctor out there, where do they go?
Physician Transformation Institute. All you have to do is Google it, and with the first link that pops up, you know you're in the right place when you see pictures of other doctors in the back end and me talking about AI. So yeah, check it out.
Physician Transformation Institute. I mean, even the name is inspiring. All right, we really have taken up too much of your time today, but we so appreciate it. And hopefully you'll come back and have another chat with us. And just thanks so much for all that you're doing on the planet. Massive, massive things. So good for everyone involved. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate your time as well for letting me come on and speak to your beautiful audience. I appreciate you.
Thanks so much. Thanks again, Bill McKenna. We'll talk to everybody again very soon. Until then, be safe and be well. Thanks for being here with us on the New Life Perspective radio show. For more information or to find out more about the work that Bill and I do, please visit us at Cognomovement.com or email us at info@Cognomovement.com. See you again soon.